First time going live.
We are live. All right.
Pretty set, go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Energility, Connecting the Dots, our series of webinars focused on energy and all related topics. We've covered a number of things in the past few months, but no matter how compelling the topic is, if you want to get something done, you're going to have to find a way to spend a little money to get that done, to reap the rewards that you've planned for. One of the most compelling vehicles to fund projects is called CPACE, and that's what the topic is today. And before I turn it over to Justin to tell you a little bit more, just a quick couple of tidbits for you. Your mics are all muted, so if you have any questions, please just use the chat box. I'll be taking a look at that as we go through. And I'd like to also take a moment and ask that you just type in any questions that you would like to have us cover while we're talking to you today. If anything comes up during the webinar, just type it in and we'll get to it. So with that, I'd like to introduce Justin Kale, the Director of Opportunity Development here at Energility. My name is Richard Alexu, and I'll be back at the end. Thanks. Take it.
All right, man. Well, thanks again, everybody, for diving in and joining with us to talk about CPACE, or Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy. So I'm going to get my screen shared here so we can break down a few of these details. And there we go. There we go. We'll do this call it the old-fashioned way from
the old-fashioned way, and I think we've got it.
There we go.
Hot dog.
It's almost like it's 2019 again. All right, so we're gonna, after we got through those potholes, we're gonna get back on the road here. Like Rich said, we're talking about CPACE today. We're gonna give you the kind of who, what, when, why, where, how, and give you some examples here to help support the work that you all are doing and the buildings that you own, or the work that you're doing to try to facilitate clean energy projects. So the tool has been around for quite a while now, going on 2 decades. Started in California. We're fortunate sitting here in the center of Ohio. We always tell folks we're Central Ohio based, Ohio focused. We've traveled around the country in a couple different places to do work for clients. But Ohio is actually the second largest PACE consumer by projects and dollars. We've invested a couple $100 million in PACE projects in the state of Ohio. We got the opportunity to do that starting in 2009, and it's really grown here in the last 10 years. But these are some of the things that folks like building owners are gravitating towards, being able to not just do a project at a time. Everybody knows construction is disruptive, especially disruptive when you're doing one thing at a time. And if you can take advantage of the benefits right away and reap those, that kind of offsets a little of the sting of borrowing. I know a lot of faith-based organizations, or even just individual building owners, that they don't have an appetite to borrow. But there's many folks out there in the commercial real estate and building owners and business owners, that leaders of organizations, they understand you gotta borrow money to make your project work. So who's doing projects? We just touched on a couple of them. We've just done our first nonprofit CPACE project here within the last 2 years, and multifamily buildings are seeing it as an attractive way to finance new construction. Buildings that are any commercial or industrial building in the state of Ohio is eligible to use this tool. We'll go through a few of the steps that have to be done. If a PACE project hasn't already been done in your area, and been done in many municipalities throughout the state. So there's currently not a residential program. So in Ohio, the saying is 4 doors or more. Those projects would count in the multifamily realm and as commercial, so they are eligible. But it's again across the spectrum of commercial industrial buildings. So let's just break down for a second the acronym PACE. The C stands for commercial, but the P and the A, property assessed. So in the state of Ohio, within the structure of paying property taxes, there's a line item in there for the municipality to get their money for police and fire and safety and sidewalks and maintenance. And there's ways for the joint vocational school or the school district. There's all these line items, right? In tax bill, it's not just here's your tax bill, but it's hey, there's a little sliver for everybody to fund different things. So the property taxes are being paid by building owners, and so it starts to get a little complicated when we start even bringing up the idea of property taxes, right? It's certainly not why anybody would dial into this event here today, because property taxes are not one of those things. I probably already talked about it more than anybody wants to hear me talk about it. But basically, we want to set the stage here. PACE is not, and these are some of the things we've heard, it's not free money. It's not a grant. It's not a rebate. It is not a tax, and it's not a tax credit. So the property assessed part of the acronym indicates that it actually is going on the property taxes, but it simply allows a building owner to borrow funds from a lender of their choice. So there isn't a PACE that gives out money, a lender called PACE that gives out money. There are lenders that participate in a program called PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy. And what the program actually allows the building owner to do is, since they're already paying property taxes, it simply gets consent at the local level where they pay their taxes to set up what's called an energy special improvement district, just simply a conduit. So when the municipality and the school district all get their sliver of money, a building owner that's borrowed money in the PACE program, they pay their lender back through one of those line items in the property tax bill. So it saves them from having to pay 12 monthly loan payments. It doesn't show up in any other format. It just shows up as a line item on the tax bill. So building owners are going to pay their taxes anyway to keep their building operating. They're just paying back money that they borrowed in the property assessed clean energy program. Now, the program allows them to borrow money based on what they're borrowing against. They're borrowing money for new HVAC or new lighting, maybe solar panels, or an energy consuming piece of equipment that they're replacing. Whatever its useful life is, that's going to determine how long they're borrowing. So they're borrowing for, say, a roof, might be able to borrow 20, 25, 30 years. Borrowing for solar panels, 25 years. Borrowing for lighting, could be anywhere from 15 to 25 years. It all depends on what's the scope of work that's being borrowed to be able to make those capital improvements at the property. Now, the person that's funding that can be a lender, whether it's private equity. There's a lot of participation in the state of Ohio from the port authorities, issuing money through the public sector. And then also it's growing as a tool that local or regional banks are able to participate in the program. In the past, those type of banks would typically say, hey, I'll give you a capital lease, or I'll give you some sort of 5 to 7 year loan on a piece of equipment. But this allows them, a building owner, to be able to use even a local or regional bank to do the project, as long as they're conversant in the PACE program. And the simple thing to kind of get people a little bit more dialed into understanding it, because it is a newer tool to some folks, is that really, if a building owner has reasonably good financials and a good plan, they can get funding for this project. We have talked to folks that, the building's in disrepair, they're having issues, and it's certainly a good tool to be able to address deferred maintenance or equipment that's in poor condition or efficiencies that would help the business run better. However, you still have to be able to generate enough cash flow to be able to pay the PACE debt back. So it's again, if a building owner is able to get bank financing, they can probably get approved through the PACE program, no problem. So the next two parts of that, commercial property assessed, the clean energy part is really about capital improvements that are at the property. So again, it's not going to fund, say, a new Energy Star refrigerator, but it would fund, the capital to replace a roof, lighting, HVAC, things that are going to improve the efficiency, improve the operating condition of the property. And we'll talk about the difference too, because those clean energy projects can be, hey, I'm swapping out my lights here in the office, or it could be, hey, I'm building a new building, but I don't just want to build it to the code. I just don't want to get across the finish line. I want to really raise the bar. I want to make my building optimally efficient. We'll talk about that here in a second, but it's really about any of these big capital items and improving the operations of the building. Again, you got to generate cash flow by reducing your energy costs and reducing your expenses. So it's about replacing those old systems, but it also could be used in new construction. So it could be building that's built to code, and then the owner is going to put additional insulation in. Maybe they're going to add, most everybody's adding LED lighting in, but they're going to add in higher R value windows. They're going to add in a higher SEER or a higher efficiency heating and cooling system. Those new construction costs are also eligible for the program. Now, again, PACE is not going to fund your new building, but it will fund a sliver of your capital stack. We'll show that visibly here in a second. So some of the reasons that a building owner would want to use PACE is to be able to preserve their capital. Cash is king, as they say. Well, if a building owner wants to make these improvements, and by making the improvements, they can reduce their energy costs, they're going to take on this additional repayment of debt through their property taxes. If that's a cash flow positive proposition, hey, save the cash, put it to work elsewhere, and then fund these projects that are going to last 15, 20, 25 years. Again, the program can be used for retrofitting equipment, but it can also be used in the new construction realm, and the code is the bar for that. So, as we stated here a second ago, if you're building your new building, again, same multifamily, office building, industrial, it still has to be one of those, commercial building classifications. As long as you're building it better than code, so the code's going to dictate that you have to put in a certain minimum efficiency or a certain type of insulation. If you're going above that, that's where the PACE program could come into gathering the capital to fund additional insulation or additional efficiency.
Is it simply above, or is it 10%, 15%?
That's a good question. So what we've actually seen here in Franklin County is they started raising the bar up a little bit. There was kind of a moniker around, for several years about, as long as you're saving a kilowatt hour, or you're saving a little bit of gas, that it would cross the finish line to get PACE. And in the case in Franklin County and the Columbus Regional Energy Special Improvement District, there has to be a minimum of 3% on a system level basis. So that, is not terribly high bar to cross, but there are some states around the country that have minimum payback requirements, minimum efficiency gains and savings requirements. I believe there's also a couple that have some pretty significant teeth in terms of there has to be a guaranteed savings to that. In Ohio, it doesn't have that. What we found is a lot of our clients are wanting, they're seeing the they're seeing the idea that green isn't just a buzzword, right? That it's good business practice. So they're making those investments with incremental cost by using PACE and taking on the debt service, but using that to offset the efficiency gains.
And on a system by system basis, if I'm upgrading a couple of systems that are well beyond the line, but I have one that's not quite there, is it looked at collectively or on an individual basis?
That's a good question too. So when you're doing the retrofit, it's going to be looked at on a system level basis. And looking at the building, there's some thought given into whole building energy model. So it's all about contributing to that total building energy savings. What becomes a little trickier, because a lot of construction projects have that big like guaranteed maximum price. A lot of those have budgets built into them, right, on a discipline level or a system level basis. But pulling apart those costs, that's what starts to become a little bit challenging. For example, if you're putting in new insulation in the wall, do you count the sheetrock? Do you count the fasteners? Well, I would say they're not getting that granular down to that level, but like the sheetrock, for example, contributes to the R value. So in the case of new construction, being able to claim the costs for that entire vertical assembly, because it's not just the fibers of of blown in insulation or a fiberglass, but it's that entire system that's actually what you're improving. So, again, that kind of gets into splitting some of the I guess some of the details that we'll talk to folks about here in a minute, but we'll touch on in CPACE 102 next month.
Got it.
So moving along here, kind of getting to the what is it and what are some of the benefits. Why would somebody do this program where they're borrowing money to pay for improvements to their building? And really, I had a guy tell me here, probably about 2 or 3 years ago, that he's like, Justin, when you boil it down, it's about total cost of occupancy, and it's really that's right on the money. I mean, because in a building with leased space with tenants, or even a lot of single tenant buildings, the business has a lease for the holding company there, so they're paying a lease too, so they recognize what their operating costs are. But you got energy, you got maintenance, and you got taxes, all of which are baked into operating costs. And so if your energy costs go down, show an example in our case study, your maintenance costs go down, but your property taxes go up. Again, remember, PACE is not a tax. You're just taking on, through the repayment of property taxes, you're taking on your debt as part of the sliver in the property tax payment. If you stack all three of those up and your energy costs, maintenance costs go down, but your taxes go up, hey, as long as the total, is net positive, great. Again, why would you not do that? So there's, energy efficiency or renewable energy projects that can be done through this. Some of the reasons that you want to do this is you have the opportunity to do, again, a bundle of projects. You want to do solar, but you got to do your roof. Or, hey, I'd really like to upgrade the controls in my building, but I got to upgrade the chillers also. Well, and it's kind of that chicken and the egg question, right? Which one comes first? Well, PACE, you don't have to pick which egg. You can just have the whole basket. You have all of them. The other reason that a lot of real estate folks are interested in PACE is this type of borrowing, because it's on your property taxes as a special assessment. The building's LLC is actually liable for the repayment, not the owner. And once the PACE project is done and it's cash flowing the way that it was, that the lender had stipulated, again, we'll get into PACE 102 kind of going through underwriting and some of the other minutia and details. But basically, once the project's done, this is the building's responsibility to pay. So that brings up the third point is, hey, you do this at your property and you say, hey, great, I've done what I need to do. I got my investment 5 years, 7 years, whatever it is. I'm ready to move on to the next building, or I'm ready to cash out of this one. You sell it and I buy it and take on. I got that new HVAC that you put in 5 years ago or 7 years ago. I got the benefit of your improvements. So I'm just going to pick up where you left off, paying property taxes and paying for that debt service. So building owners like it because then it transfers with the property. And that is something too, because the market is, we're slowly getting there, but it's, like I said, in Central Ohio, it's been pretty active for the last 10 years. We've had the benefit of checking with a couple of building owners that have actually done PACE projects and sold their building. And I was keenly interested when I saw one on Columbus Business First a while back, because that was the first time that I had seen one of our projects get transitioned. So I reached out to the guy and he gave me a real quick update on the project. But one of the things he told me, he said, Justin, he said, once we educated the buyer why this was in the operating expenses, he said, check, move on. I mean, it was not a deal breaker, and it wasn't, that's kind of a myth around too sometimes, or not sometimes, when you borrow money through traditional means and you go to sell a building, you got to pay that debt off,
Right.
Because it's, building's going to be held with new entity. In this case, you're just paying the property taxes, and again, you got to do that to keep the building running. The other kind of last highlight is, again, because all of the occupancy cost is factored into this equation. There are leases out there that allow the building owners to pass some of those capital costs through to tenants, and in many cases that's a big nugget in the sustainability field that has had a hard time getting cracked, because you have this age-old conundrum of, hey, the building owner has to pay for capital, the tenant or occupant has to pay the operating cost for it. Well, who's going to make that investment in the building? And without a compelling reason to do so, sometimes there's a great standoff, and tenants watch their operating expenses go up, and owners watch their building deteriorate because they don't want to put a lot of money into it. Well, in this case, you get a chance, hey, pass some of that capital through, and you're passing the cost of taxes and energy through. So it's, again, in some cases passed through to the tenants. So this gets down to the whole question. This all sounds great. How do you do this? And that's, talked to a number of folks that are like, gosh, one, it sounds too good to be true. Two, okay, assuming it is true, you guys have done this before. How do we get this done? Well, the energy planner and energy audit is the first step. Being able to identify what are the energy efficiency projects, how much are they going to save, what's their energy reduction, all of those factors that are going to say, hey, this project is eligible for the program. And then from the building owner side, the process is actually quite a bit simpler, because it's just about getting together the financial package that they would typically put together for bank lending. In some cases, we've been working with owners that have been refinancing. They're in the process of refinancing the building, and they're trying to decide, do I pull cash out? Do I have to set aside a portion to be able to make some of these improvements, update the building, et cetera? Well, if you're already going through a refinance process, or you've recently done that, you've got an appraisal, you've got your financial statements, you got all that stuff together. That's the same type of stuff that's going to be needed for this program. So again, it's not it's not special in those mechanics. It's very, very much the blocking and tackling you would expect for borrowing. A couple key points are knowing ratios. Again, a lot of real estate guys, they're really just dialed in. The guys and gals that run these buildings know what the ratios are. They know their debt to their loan to value. They know how much cash flow, free cash flow they have. There's two things to consider with a PACE loan or a PACE assessment, is that the property can't be leveraged more than 90%. haven't seen a lender yet that will allow a building owner to be over leveraged. They want to see that with your debt service on the building, your first mortgage or maybe even first and second mortgage, that in addition to the PACE, again, it's paid through property taxes, but their underwriting process is going to look at it like it's a piece of debt, so that it's adding value to the building, but it can't over leverage the property more than 90%. And then also the PACE lenders, depending on what their requirements are, some of the folks in the port authorities have a little bit less discretion because they're using public money and they have very clear black and white boundaries for what they can and can't do. Some of the private equity folks are saying, hey, we've got X amount of $1 million in the bank. We're beholden as fiduciary to invest that for clean energy projects, and they can have a little flex in their ratio or in their percentage. But generally speaking, between 25 and 50% is the top of the scale in terms of PACE amount to value of the building. So the building's worth $1 million, you can borrow $250,000. It's worth $5 million, you can borrow $1.5 million, maybe up to $2.5 million. Generally speaking, 25 to 35% is kind of that sweet spot, for borrowing. And it does have to go through an underwriting process with whichever lender. So I'm going to go through real quickly a couple of case studies, and I don't see that we've got any comments or questions yet. This is just a quick snapshot from kind of touch on a few of the main areas that we've talked about with PACE. In this case study, this is one of our clients that we worked with. They actually, and I'm actually going to go back for just a second. The last point to make here is, when they're doing underwriting, one of the things that we want to always share with the lender is, hey, what incentives are coming with this project? Because again, as I stated before, it isn't an either or, but they want to see, hey, if this PACE project's going to be $1 million, are there incentives that are also being part of the cash flow equation? So in this particular case, building owner did a project that was just a little south of $1 million. But at the same time, we worked to be able to get an exemption on the property and use that exemption through a program in Ohio called Ohio Air Quality Development Authority. They want to provide these types of benefits because there is the driving force of doing an energy efficiency project, doing a renewable energy project, doing clean energy projects helps to reduce the environmental impact, and therefore meets their mission of making air quality better. So the exemption that isn't, be clear, this exemption isn't because they did PACE, and it's not with all PACE projects. This just happens to be part of the capital stack of the incentives. So they actually borrowed, like I said, just a little south of $1 million, and their payment every year is about $85,000. So the regular tax bill shows up, the reduction from this exemption is discounted, and so their current tax is about $76,000. They have special assessment, i.e. the PACE project, and again, here's where it's broken out down here, is the special assessment is a line item here on the total tax bill, and then it breaks down any salient details down here, but it's a special assessment. So then, that gets split in Ohio into 2 payments every year. So that this project actually has generated over $80,000 per year. So when we started working on the project, they were starting to replace equipment around the building, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year. They had tens of thousands of dollars of repair items that were starting to occur frequently enough that it got a knock on my door because we were leasing some space in an adjacent building, and he said, "Hey, what can we do for the building up the street?" So we took a look at it, and so the long and short is they're saving over $80,000 a year compared to when we started and when we did the project in 2018, and I don't know, Rich, 6-7 years.
Mhm.
You know, gonna put you on the spot. Energy rates up, down.
Let me think.
Yeah. So I mean, energy rates have continued to go up in the last 6-7 years. So again, this was their number that they made the decision on
Mhm.
in 2018, and then they were spending like I said, about $20,000 a year, which I think was even a conservative estimate at the time. So you can see they're making an $85,000 payment. They're saving $80,000 plus they're saving $20,000 on the chiller, and then with the program that we were able to kind of I call it the belt and suspenders, right? And kind of the dual approach. We worked with programs to get that done. Also generated an exemption here, so it's just about cash flow positive darn near from the get go, and then you add in all these other factors. It's like, gee whiz, let's do this. So this is again just a quick snapshot of our. It's actually our office building here, where our office is. About $900,000 project, and the you can see here it's got positive cash flow all the way out, and the term for the PACE assessment is 19 years. So the equipment's expected to last beyond the 20-year mark. So the project's cash flowing, and will have expected useful life at the end of that. So kind of the win-win-win for everybody. So going to touch on a few quick resources. When we were talking earlier, we're not going to dive into the weeds on new construction, but again, the program allows a building owner that's taking a building out of the ground, and I guess I would say too, building out of the ground, or they're doing a significant renovation, maybe gutting the building, maybe changing the use of it, maybe not, but any of those cases, a significant renovation or a new construction project, the building owner can use PACE as part of their capital stack for borrowing. They're still probably going to have to borrow some money unless they're paying cash for it. But in most cases, there's a senior lender in play, and they're usually having to get the building done by a combination of debt and equity. And the more complicated the capital stack, the more it would tend to cost. So when you look at stacking up a traditional piece of debt, some mezzanine debt, and then owners having to have equity in the deal, you're looking at and this was not too terribly long ago. This is a link from the Better Buildings DOE. About 7%, probably a little bit light, depending on the program. I guess I probably should have touched on that. I know there's a lot of rate sensitive real estate folks.
Mhm.
Is the PACE rates tend to float ahead of what the 10-year treasury is, and the public entities like port authorities and such, because they're securing bonds at different times in the market, they may not exactly align with that. But this is just really more of an example for educational purposes. If you're stacking up construction debt, anywhere from a pretty good senior piece of debt to equity in the deal being just south of 20% in cost of equity, you do that same thing here, but you take out some of that more expensive debt, where you reduce the amount that has to be borrowed overall. And again, it goes back to my guy John's statement of, hey, it's about total cost of occupancy. Well, new construction, it's about the total cost of debt. And so PACE can be an attractive financing tool to get some of these clean energy elements added into a building. I'm going to show you, and these are not an endorsement of us saying, hey, these are the folks that you have to use. They're also not an endorsement of these organizations for us. We're just simply showing you some resources here, and many of these folks on here we've worked directly with on some or multiple deals. Nuveen Green Capital started out as Greenworks and was one of the early leaders in the PACE space, and have some very attractive offerings in being able to get projects done. PACE Equity's got a really neat tool, especially for building owners that have a sensitivity to rate and to the interest rate, because they have a program called the Cirrus Low Carbon, which if a project not just meets the code requirement and goes a little bit above, but it has to hit certain thresholds of efficiency savings across the different systems or whole building, they actually give a rate reduction. So again, nice kind of interesting tool to be able to be used. Group called Electrify, they have a fast pace, I think pun intended. In talking to those folks, I could see that being the case. They've got a really drilled down, simplified process to be able to do two things that's very interesting about their operations. Is they want to work with developers, work with building or getting PACE projects done. They also do some unique training to be able to get banks and lenders positioned, if they're not already offering PACE, to be able to get the structure and the infrastructure in place so that PACE could be an offering for your typical bank. And I will admittedly say I don't have it memorized, but it's something to the effect that they believe that every lender should be able to be a PACE lender. Peachtree Group has a specialty. I wanted to point them out. They have a unique special interest in hotels, and so there are PACE lenders out there looking at hey, how do we lend money again from a private equity standpoint? The lenders are driving, hey, what type of projects do we want? They do all kinds of PACE projects, but they have a particular affinity towards the hotel market. Imperial Ridge, another big lender in the based out in Colorado. Columbus Franklin County Finance Authority, the port authorities in the state of Ohio. There's over half a dozen of them here in the state. They actually all, the way our structure is set up here in Ohio, it's kind of nice. They're able to work together and build some joint efforts with their resources. For example, up in Northwest Ohio, I know the Franklin County Finance Authority and the Toledo Port Authority worked together on structuring a deal here recently that hit the news cycle. Some great folks working in the public finance space.
Nice.
One of the big resource players and great folks down at Bricker Graydon, they have a website link here that has a resource center that hits an overview on the PACE program. They get into Tennessee and Michigan, Pennsylvania, adjacent areas that have a PACE program, and they have some nice interactive maps. So if you want to see relatively real time, like, hey, what's going on or what type of projects have closed in certain areas, this just kind of, again, hits on the statement that I made before. It's a program that's available, but then kind of getting into a little bit of the minutia of getting it approved has to be done at the local level. And you can see around Ohio, about half the counties here have done, PACE project with, various groupings here in Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati. Toledo was the real early adopter, about 15 years ago. And you can see even around some of the rural areas of the state, there's been some PACE projects done. But the resources from Bricker Graydon and the folks there, really top notch, getting resources in the hands of folks that need it, like developers, building owners, consultants like ourselves. So kind of the getting started, get that energy plan, what's the budget, start engineering the project, make sure the clean energy aspect is able to be adhered to, and then, get contractor pricing together. That's kind of a 5-step process, I guess you would say. One of the key items that we do in the energy plans is touch on what are those additional financial, non-energy related financial benefits, things like air quality, their clean air program, or whether it's deductions or depreciation or investment tax credits. Things like that can all go into making these projects not only attractive from the clean energy aspect, but then also financially beneficial and viable. So we always want to help you connect the dots, and getting these capital projects done helps building owners preserve their cash. It can make these clean energy projects happen, but looking at it like it's an investment, right? These projects
Correct.
are going to be around for a while. The solar panels are going to be around for a couple decades. The high efficiency chillers, the high efficiency LED lighting is going to be around for quite a while. These are investments folks are making in their buildings, and they are possible and viable. And the PACE program is great, and we've sung all of its praises this last half hour, 40 minutes. Probably the biggest drawback is it does take a lot of understanding to get through the program. And I would say folks that we've worked with, several clients that have gone through multiple times, and most of them get it. They get it. They know how it goes. But even then, they're like, "Hey, we'd like you to just kind of run point on this," or they have particular folks in their team. They're bringing us in to do the energy part, and then they got their finance folks and their construction folks.
Right.
But it does take a lot of support, and any folks that are tasked with managing real estate, whether again it's a nonprofit, whether it's a commercial high-rise or office building, or multifamily building, folks get that real estate isn't that glamorous thing that shows up in everybody's social media feed. Hey, you too should buy some real estate. So it takes a lot of support. We appreciate your dialing in so we can help connect the dots. We're going to touch on PACE 102 in February, and we'll kind of break down the roadmap a little bit more, kind of from getting that application in all the way through the getting a project closed, and kind of share a few tips and tidbits, things that we know and things that we've done this a couple dozen times. So want to just share a few more tools of the trade and tactics that help get it done.
Excellent. A lot of good material today, Justin. Thank you. Like you said earlier, win-win-win. It's a win for the building owner. It's a win for the environment, a win for economic development in the area where the building is. So thank you all for being part of this. We do hope you found it informational and valuable, and let's keep going next month. That'll be Thursday, February 20th. We hope to see you there. If you'd like a copy of the slides, you can send an email to justin@energility.com or richard@energility.com. Or if you have any other questions or topics that you'd like to see in the future, by all means, feel free to reach out at any time. Otherwise, hope you have a great month, and we'll see you back in February. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.